I will give André a bit of an intro. I've known him for over 10 years now, at least, I think. I think it probably, oh my goodness, it's probably close to 15 years that we've known each other from my days back in the UK and the community over there. And really cool that he's been down here a couple of times for Sequel Saturday events and presented. So he's familiar with the area, and really good to be able to reach out to him and get him to come up with a topic, and an interesting one that we've never covered before in this group. So we're really looking forward to seeing it with DBT. So we'll pass on to André, give himself a bit of an intro and lead us into the session. Over to you, André.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I wonder if you're going to find it interesting as well. First of all, how's my audio? Is everything okay? All right, good. I realized that I have not charged this thing yesterday, and it should be okay. So if you see me panic all of a sudden and throw this thing away and you hear different audio, I'm switching to the laptop, but it should be fine. All right, let's get things going. I can share my screen, get that underway, and then start this thing and start that. Double click that. All right. Now you should be seeing my PowerPoint.
Yep.
And if I switch to, stop my code space, start my code space. There we go. You can see this as well?
Yep.
All right. And here's my, all right, everything okay. Good. Oh, now it switches there. I have to keep that in mind. Sometimes I need to double click on it. I've got a Mac and I'm not used to a Mac. My laptop, so COVID started, threw my laptop in the corner, bought myself a big PC, and all good. But we've moved to Slovenia for the summer since my girlfriend is from Slovenia. So we're not in Amsterdam, and my laptop died. I hadn't used the thing in like 5 years. And my girlfriend, Kamman, gave me one of her laptops that she has around here in her office. And it's a MacBook Air M1 minimal spec. It's like 8 gigs of memory and such. These things are fast. Oh my God. I am not used to this, but this is really cool actually. So in case you're wondering, this is high-end skincare. If I can give anyone some skin, she's probably not okay with me giving it away, but sells it all over. She sells it all over the world. She rocks. She is amazing. Pallets of the stuff are going to China and what. That's really cool. Right. About me. I'm a Dutchie, and I've learned English from the TV. These days, kids learn English in school, but I learned it from the TV as German as well. And I didn't start actually speaking English a lot since I met some friends from Scotland, and they took me to holidays in Scotland since I was 17 or something. Hence the strange Dutch with a hint of Scottish in my accent. It's a bit weird, I know. I will never get rid of that. Also, I'm from a rural area in Holland, so if I speak Dutch, people go, "Oh, are you a farmer?" Really? Just because I sound. Anyway, I live in Amsterdam these days. Except for this summer, we live in Ljubljana in Slovenia. If you ever get around to a nice holiday in Europe, try the Balkans for a change. It's beautiful around here. This is an amazing area. I can say my Irish. Thanks, Martin. So about today, I've been in IT since 1989, hence the gray hair. Martin, we're about the same age, right? I'm 52. You're
I'm only just ahead of you.
Yeah. Same with the baby. So his baby is 5 days. Kamman is 23 weeks pregnant right now. So there's gonna be I'm gonna be behind a bit. Oh well. I can ping you when I get scared that I'm gonna be a dad at 52, right?
Yeah, no problem.
All right. I've been an MVP since 2009. There used to be SQL Server, I did a lot of SQL Server. I've been one of these DBAs that for literally thousands of instances at a bank. One of these people that always say no if you want something, right? I guess we all remember this, where the old days you didn't automate your scripts running on a database. There is no such thing as Azure DevOps or something. You just had to give your scripts or email them to a DBA, and they would look through them, and then if they approve, then they would run them on the server. Horrible, horrible days. Never want to do that again. Anyway, that's me. These days, I live in Azure, basically. I most of my work is in Databricks. I do a lot of Azure Data Factory, Azure SQL DB, all this stuff. I have a few on-prem SQL databases, but we don't really touch them. The only thing I do with them is get the data out with Data Factory. So I don't really do a SQL Server anymore. I did do a lot of PowerShell until this Azure thing became the Databricks became a thing for me, and now I'm just using Python a lot because that's the language in that you need to use in Azure, basically, if you're in the data world. For now, let's see. Anything else? Nah, that's it. If I have no idea how much time I have, I'll just start talking and share experiences. If you have any questions, let me know. We can make this as interactive as you want. I might have a hard time hearing the speaker on the table there in the room. So if I can't hear, maybe it's a good idea if somebody types the question or something. But having said that, so let's get started. Let's see, no, I have to select and then press the space bar. Here we go. Okay, do you remember this, people? Does this look familiar to you? The picture is a bit not very sharp, but so I'm going to talk about DBT and my experiences with it and whether I like it or not. And it's going to be like an intro session. So I'm going to show you what it can do and why I started using it. And the first time I started using it, I started thinking back of my days in SSIS. The very first, I was not very lucky. The very first SSIS project I did was 1,600 or 1,800, I forgot, but well over 1,000. Tables, and we had no idea that you could automate this stuff. So I did a lot of dragging and dropping for months. Never doing that again. If somebody gives me a GUI-based system that has no automation in it, no thank you. Has anyone been around doing SSIS by hand? Thousands of packages? Oh yeah, horrible. Huh? Yeah, some hands in the back. All right. So then you've seen this one as well, right? You probably know about BIML if you've used SSIS. The way to just write some code and some loops, and it spits out a bunch of SSIS packages. The first time I saw this, I thought, okay, let's tinker a bit. Let's make empty packages, right? And I just wrote a loop, and it just spit out a bunch of packages, and I'm like, okay, I wish I knew this a couple of years ago. This is amazing. So now every time I look at an ETL type project or process, I want to know if there is anything that you can do with either metadata or automation to generate or not repeat yourself the whole time. And that's how I got to know DBT. So it can be a bit confusing. Has anyone tried DBT already? All right, some careful hands there. Some careful. Usually with these sessions, there's some really careful hands in the back. Like, I've tried it, I've downloaded it, couldn't get it to work, and then there's somebody that says, "I'm the general manager for the DBT platform in the DBT company," and I was just curious what you're gonna say. No, so I'm a beginner in DBT. I spent my time in Databricks. I do a lot of automation with Databricks. Is just a database, but different, right? And we have lots and lots and lots of SQL, and they all live in things called notebooks. But if you look at a lot of data warehousing projects, they could also be SQL files with a lot of SQL in it. that you have to run, and they're always the same. You have to run these first, and then you have to run these because they depend on what these produce, and then you can run those 50 files, and then there's another 100, but they have to wait until everything else is done. And there's like layers in them, and the layers are sometimes well defined, sometimes they're not. And I run into this in the cloud. Sometimes it's because they translate stuff that comes from an on-prem SQL DB. I had one the other day where it was one stored procedure that that in them had 115 stored procedure calls, and the 115 other stored procedure calls each had one query in them, and the order was really important. So you couldn't just change the order; everything would break. And we tried to move that to something in Databricks and also the SQL first. So I'm running into interesting behavior of Databricks. For those who don't know Databricks, it's basically you have something called Spark. Spark is a distributed engine, so you have many servers, and you can throw SQL at it. It's called Spark SQL. It's sometimes nicer than T-SQL from SQL Server, sometimes not, but it has some cool features that I like for data warehousing. And if you throw the SQL at it, it will distribute this across the server. So it will grab all your data, and your data can be stored as JSON or CSV, or hopefully as something a bit nicer like Parquet or Delta, a nice format that allows it to work really fast and only get the data that it needs. For those who've never seen a Parquet file, it's like a column store index on SQL Server. Same difference. It's columnar compressed stuff, and it can you basically every time you query it, you're doing a really fancy full table scan. It has no indexes, but it can skip things really quickly. That's basically how that works. In a nutshell, this is a 1 minute explanation. Of course, it's more complex than that. So this is really cool for SQL Server project that I had that came from on-prem. I was always struggling with resources, and we needed to move that to Databricks, because the first problem that you fix immediately when you start storing your data in Databricks is it lives on a storage account, a blob storage account. The first thing the project manager always does is, André, how much data do we request? What fits in a storage account? First of all, you don't request anything. It's just you create a storage account and you're done. Anyone want to guess how much a storage account can hold by default, just out of the box? No guesses. 6 petabytes. So you're going to run out of money way before you're going to run out of space, right? Your credit card will hurt. It's not the space that will be a problem. Same with Databricks. Because the storage is somewhere else, you're just having a bunch of compute. So you can start a cluster of machines that will run your queries, but you can start as many as you want. If you want a big one for your process, but somebody else needs a little one that's always on to load little files throughout the day, go ahead. It's disconnected from the storage. It's really cool. Now, problem that I had, I'm going somewhere with this story. This is not a Databricks session. The problem that I had is the scheduling mechanism in Databricks. So as much as I don't like the SQL Server agent, it's getting a bit old and it's not being improved for a long time now. So building in dependencies is really hard. So dbt would work there as well, and I'll show you in a sec. Databricks has a similar problem. You can have, up to a half a year ago, you could just have one notebook that had just a bunch of queries underneath each other. And you could schedule the one notebook. You could say, here is my notebook, and I want you to create a cluster at night. So it will actually create compute for you. Just so VMs are being built as part of the schedule and then thrown away when you're done. It's really cool. Very cost effective. So the compute is only around for when that query runs. So the first thing that we did was get a notebook, put all the queries underneath each other, but they were quite lengthy, and every time we opened it, sometimes the notebook would crash because 115 large queries in one notebook, it just didn't like it. So next try, maybe we have 115 notebooks, each with one query. Maybe that would work. So since about half a year, November, December last year, I forgot, You can schedule in Databricks multiple notebooks, and you can tell the dependencies. You can say this one comes first, and then this one can only be done when this one is done, like a data factory kind of thing, where you can say these three needs to be done first, and then that one. We even wrote some code to have the dependencies automated, so we don't have to drag and drop, because it's just a JSON file that you feed to an API. So all good. And we ended up with an error message that said you can only do 100 notebooks. So now we have two jobs. We had to split it up, and the second one cannot reuse the cluster of the first one. So now we have to wait 5 minutes for the cluster to be built. Then it runs for 10 minutes, then it throws away the cluster, builds a new one, takes also 5 minutes, and runs for another 2 minutes, and then throws that cluster away. Meh. I was not that happy with that one. So I started to look at DBT. If you look at DBT, is a bit confusing. It has a on its main website, it said, okay, it sits in the middle of it. It seems to be doing everything, right? This your raw data and then outcome data sets. So can it move data? Does it do that? How does it do the transformations? What does it do? Also, what does it run on? Right? It has a. If you look at the user interface, you have to make an account, and you have to pay for that. There is a free version. What does that do? It's not cheap either, and it's supposed to be open source. So I was confused. Now it turns out that this GUI-based thing that they offer, even the free version, that's not the open source. It is built on the open source thing, but that's not the one I'm demoing today. The open source thing is DBT that you host yourself. So you forget all about the GUI that they provide. You just download DBT yourself and you run it somewhere. And it's free. It's open source. That's the beautiful part. Another beautiful part. Let's see if I have that. Nope. Doesn't matter. I might repeat myself here. We'll see. Another beautiful part. You see these compute platforms that it markets underneath this marketing slide. It's Snowflake and Redshift, and there's Databricks. Those are all the big platforms in Azure and Amazon. And what if you have a SQL server, right? What if, even a local SQL server? Can you do that? And the answer is absolutely yes. They just don't market that. They target the paid version. They target the big databases like Snowflake and Databricks. But for the open source version that you download yourself, you can totally use a SQL server. That's totally fine. You can even use an on-prem SQL server and target that one and run it on-prem. No problem at all. I will show you, my stuff runs in the cloud. I will show you that, but I'll make sure that I'll show you how that translates to on-prem. Shouldn't be any problem at all. Also, my demo that I'll show you, the whole thing, is based on Azure SQL DB. So nothing fancy. I'm not using Databricks. I didn't want to put too many technologies into one demo. I'm hoping we've all, even if you don't work with SQL Server anymore like me, I'm hoping we've all seen SQL Server in this room at some point, right? All right. So a tiny bit about the history of this thing. There's a program called Stitch. It's an open, it's a SaaS platform, and it will grab data from your databases and transform it and move, not transform it and move it to somewhere. And they needed a transform capability. So some company, RJ Metrics, created DBT as an open source thing to provide the T in ETL, nothing else, just transform. Then another company, there's a rename of one company, it doesn't really matter. There's Fishtown Analytics. They made a commercial product. That's the one that you can see now. You go to getdbt.com and you sign up for an account and use their free version. That's the commercial product that Fishtown Analytics made. And they renamed themselves to DBT Labs, collected a lot of money. The series A, B, C, and D, that went really fast inside almost a year, 2 years. And the last one was over 200 million. So they grew like crazy. And then like All the other companies half a year ago, they laid off half the people, they doubled the price, and their message on what they are going to provide for the future is a bit weird. People are thinking, okay, not sure about your paid product, but we still love the open source one. So I'm just going to focus on the open source one, and we'll get to the future in the end a bit. Where are we? Okay, so if you see this, just ignore this. I'm not. We're not going to use it. I'm not using it. I'm using the completely free downloaded version that I'm hosting myself. So we don't need an account. We don't need to figure out how this works. So I'm just going to move past this. Oh yeah, and that was the slide with the what platforms do we have? All right, fine. So we've been through this. What does it do? And I really need to emphasize this one because some products can do ETL, and if you can see here that I've written ELT instead of ETL, because the old like SSIS would do the transforms on the fly. Like you load something, you'd extract something from a source, and then SSIS would transform this in memory on the fly in process, and then dump it into your final destination. In the cloud, people don't do that. They pick an engine that can do the heavy lifting, and the data gets extracted, then loaded into an engine that will do the transformation. So they fire the transformations off to a certain engine, and you can pick the engine that you want to use. Like Data Factory doesn't do any transforms. I know what you're saying. There is a transform thingy in Data Factory. Not really. They're starting a Spark cluster underneath the cover, so Data Factory itself doesn't do anything in transformation land. So this is what DBT does. The transform. That's it. So if you need to get data from one place and move it to another place, DBT will not do that. You can't even fake it. It goes so far. You have one connection in your DBT project, and if you have a logging mechanism in your project where you go, okay, I've done this table, now this table, or this process, and then that process, and you want to log that fact somewhere, so you have an overview of which, how fast are they, and did it all succeed? Do we have to rerun anything? Like more. The bigger ETL process is basically the nightly batches. Like, okay, these 50 didn't run because there was a dependency there that failed, and you can see that in the report. That logging needs to happen to the engine that you're using. You cannot log to a separate engine. That's I don't like that, but okay, here we go. So if you pick Databricks or an Azure SQL DB as your transformation target, then you also have to do your logging inside that target. You have to make a log table there. You cannot log anywhere else. There's only one connection. So what does it do? Because I just said it does T. Well, yeah, sort of, kind of. It does two more things. It can also test your data. There's built-in tests, and I will show you how that works. And it will provide documentation of your system, which is pretty cool. And I will show you that as well. So these are the four main things that I would like you to remember. DBT is open source. No need to have an account and work from a GUI. You can just download and run it yourself. It's for the transformations. It cannot move data at all. You can run tests, and it will provide documentation for you. And those are the things that I will show you. Actually, this means I will show you right now. All right, let's do that. How much time do I have anyway? Is this an hour thing, or how does this work?
Normally we go for about an hour-ish.
Okay.
So you've been going for about 25 minutes.
Okay, cool.
Cool.
So until 11. Okay, cool. That would work.
That work?
That works. Yeah. So what I have here, first of all, let me blow this up a little bit more. How is this for readability? Is this okay? Do I need to blow this up a bit more?
No, it's pretty good here.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
What I have here
Good
is
online as well.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. I'm running DBT in Git. You can run it anywhere else. It's Python based, so you have to. It runs on Windows and Linux, and if you run it on a Mac, you'd have to run something else on an M chip, the new chips, the M1 or the M2. It won't run out of the box. You have to run something called Rosetta. I don't exactly know how that works, but it's well documented. And I'm not using that because I'm using code spaces in GitHub, which basically means my VS Code is not actually running locally. I have VS Code locally, but it's all connected to a container in Azure somewhere, which mimics the whole behavior. So this doesn't run on my Mac. This runs on a container somewhere. I like that. It's there's no dependencies between my Mac. And let's start with something simple. I'll show you around this place. So what I have here is, I'll blow that up a bit as well. It's an Azure SQL DB, and it's got a Stack Overflow database. It's a limited version. I downloaded this through Brent Ozar. He provides these Stack Overflow databases, and this is my source. And I want to make some models out of it. So I want to go through stages. Databricks calls this a medallion architecture, bronze, silver, gold. You can name them staging and base and reporting, or there's so many names for them, but I have 3 layers, and my models are called raw and base and curated, but the naming is not important. This is the layers that I want to do. Basically, my raw is where data comes in the shape that it comes in. I don't know, could be anything. And then base, this is where I've cleaned it up into a standard format, deduplicated it, made if there's date columns, but they're coming as strings in the source, I've made them date columns, that kind of stuff. And curated is specialized formats for the tool that wants to use it. So if I want to load this into Power BI, I make a star schema because Power BI loves star schemas, that kind of stuff. But it will basically do anything. You can have 20 layers or 1, it doesn't matter. Now, DBT, and this is the cool part, you can run this from Git or Azure DevOps. This is all based on source code that you can use a Git provider for. So you've nice source code managed environment. So now I'll show you how to install it, because my dev container has a Docker file to install it, so I can easily say, no, I don't need Docker. Basically, you do pip install dbt SQL Server. Pip is a Python installer. So if you have Python on your machine, you can just run pip install dbt. But they also have special connectors to sources. SQL Server is one of them. And if you do pip install dbt-SQL Server, it will install the SQL Server driver for dbt and dbt. So it will just come with the dependencies as well. So you only have to do that one. And I'm installing a Unix ODBC driver as well, because this is a Linux container, and I need to connect to a SQL DB. That SQL DB that I have there. So my DBT project starts with a profile, this one. So the only thing you have to do is create a profiles.yaml, and what you need to do is declare what you're going to connect to. So I've named it dev here. You can have multiple. So it targets the first one. So if you just run DBT, and I'll show you in a bit how you run DBT, it will target this one. But you can have dev, test, prod, and you can say target prod. So you can, instead of dev, now I want to run it on prod. If you want to do it that way. So in this case, I said the type is SQL Server. Here's my driver. This is the database that I'm connecting to in my account, port 1433. I think we've seen that one often enough. And doesn't use managed identities, which is a thing in Azure. So I have to use a username password, but because I'm using a dev container, I can store that in a secret, so I don't have to host that in plain text here, which is really some advantage that I like about code spaces. They have their own built-in secrets management. And this is one that we'll get to as well. Number of threads, 8. This is an 8-core container. Not sure if I needed an 8-core container to run 8 threads, but there you go. I have 8 threads, and why this is important, we'll see in a bit. So this is where it starts, your profiles.yaml. You just create one in your root, and you're good to go. It knows how to connect now. And you can even run a dbt test, I think. So if you install dbt, you just run dbt. It will tell you what commands you can run. There's a whole bunch. And there must be a test somewhere. Test. Oh no, that runs the tests. Oh no, there's a connection thing that you can test. There is one. I forgot which one it is. Doesn't matter. I'm assuming this works because I ran it an hour ago. Famous last words. We'll see. Now, the next thing that you need is a project, because dbt needs to know how do you want to organize your data. And this is where it gets interesting. I've named my project Stack Overflow. And I have models in my project. So the models you can see here. And the models are just directories in my Git. So I have models base, curated, and raw, or actually the order is raw and then base and then curated, but alphabetical order here. And there is specific materialization that I'm using. So what I'm saying is, if I run a query in the, for instance, base model here, if I run a query on the base model, good to see you, Greg. Hopefully we'll see each other not in like 10 years or something. It's been a while since we've seen each other. The dbt, and I'll show you in a bit how that works. dbt will take your query because you don't have to specify updates and inserts and deletes yourself. You just specify a select statement. You just specify this is the data that I'm talking about, and dbt will create either a view out of it or a table or some other stuff that we can also do that I'm skipping for now, but we'll get to that. And I've basically said here, if I run something on the base layer, I want you to materialize this as a table. So any query I run there, I want you to create a table. If I run on the raw layer, I want you to build a view. So the curated layer will also be a table. So the raw layer will be a view. It does that for you, and you can overwrite this and whatnot. So let's go to the raw layer, start at the beginning. So I have SQL files here. For instance, the comments. And all it does basically is select star from the source table. And here's where it gets a bit weird. I can hard code the source table. It will run. It will work. But since I've specified something in this weird language, so this is something inside Python, and it's called Jinja templating. This is where this BIML reference comes back a bit. You can template stuff. You can inject basically Python code in here. And I'm basically saying select star from the comments table in the Stack Overflow source. And I don't know what it's called, and I don't know what it's named. Is everybody still there? I just lost the view to the conference room.
Yes, we are.
Cool.
Just lost everything temporarily, but now we seem to be back.
As long as you can see it.
There's a dodgy cable on that on the console in the room there that occasionally the screen drops out, but it's all fine.
All right, cool. As long as you can still see me and hear me, it's fine.
Yes, we're all good.
So this is where it starts. First of all, I have to tell dbt what the sources are. I have to do that once. It has to have a starting point. This is the data coming in. So in my raw layer, raw directory here, I have a YAML file that I specified. It's called raw sources. it's a naming convention. You can name it other things. Let's see. Let's move this down a bit. And what I did is I only want a few tables. I want the badges, the users, the comments, the posts, and the votes. And I can just say, listen, the sources from the Stack Overflow project that I want in this database, I want you to use this schema. And you can specify a schema per model, for instance. If you want to specify different schemas, that's fine. You can do that. But I want you to grab the name, the users table and the comments table, the posts and the votes. And I've been a bit more specific in the badges table because I've said, now there's also columns that I want you to know about instead of doing just a select star. And there's, for instance, a column called user ID, and I'm giving this silly description that doesn't say much. And what I'm also doing is I tell it to run a test. I'm saying this column cannot be null. I want you to test this before you start using this. So you can be specific or not specific. This is completely up to you. And then when I go to badges, for instance, I can just say select star from the sources and then the Stack Overflow project, the badges table, and it knows which one that is. Now, what will it do with this if I run this? Well, this runs in the raw model. It's called staging double_ badges. Here's the thing I don't like. Even though it's in different models, and I can specify to run it in different schemas, it still demands a unique name. So I can specify all the different schemas, but it still wants a unique name. So I have to do something with the prefix. So staging, why did I use staging for raw instead of raw? Okay. Oh, that's the conference room again. Hello, everybody. So if I run this, it's just a select star from this source, and it will, in raw, it will do what it needs to do in raw. And because I specified in the project that raw needs to be materialized as a view, I would expect a staging __ badges view that does a select star from, let me show you the table, that does a select star from badges. There are no views at the moment. So, but I expect it to create one for me. Fresh takes a long time because this is one of these auto-close databases. All right. Now, same thing goes for, so now that I've done the sources, the same thing goes for instance, the base that is based on the raw, but now I don't have to specify, if I go to badges, I don't have to specify the sources anymore. I can specify a reference. I can say, hey, I want you to select the top 100 star from the Stack Overflow project, the staging badges, whatever it is. It's not there yet. Might be a view, might be a table. I don't know. You're going to build something based on the specs, and it doesn't exist yet. But you figure that out. So this is how dbt can figure out all the dependencies between everything. And how it can select things from things that aren't there yet and figure out, do I build a view? Do I build a table? You have complete control over it. Now there is one. Is that the post? Yes. You, instead of specifying that, here's another schema thing, and I built another test. So base users, I want you to test if the ID is unique and not null. And I did an override here. That was on post. So instead of saying in the profiles, like, hey, base needs to be a table, that took too long for my test because it's a post table. It's a little bit bigger. So I said, no, you can instead of being a table, you can be a view, or in my case, ephemeral. And ephemeral just means don't materialize this as all. Just use it in other queries that need it. So it probably will make a CTE or a temp view. That depends on what the source system that the target system that you're using supports. So in SQL Server, it can probably do a CTE and use that. But if you're using a database that doesn't understand CTEs or an older version, it might create a view and run the query on that and then drop the view. That it totally depends on your target system. So it knows about what the capabilities of your target system are. Now, if I go through the models again, and I'll run it in a bit so you can finally see what it does. If I go to curated, here's an answer. Here's a thing that I got from the Stack Overflow website. It's the top 500 answerers, so people that answer the most questions. It's a query that I just stole. This is the query, just a copy paste from the Stack Overflow website. And since this runs on users and on posts and it joins on users, I don't want that. I don't want it to run on the raw data. I want to run on my base model that I've cleaned up and I did something with it. So what I did is I'm saying I have two CTEs here, the posts and the users, and they're actually references to the base posts and the base users. So I'm giving it the two tables that it can run on. I could also have put these references inside this query, but I see everybody in DBT doing it this way. It's a bit leaner, maybe, to just use a bunch of CTEs on the top and then have one clean query underneath without a bunch of code stuck in between. Makes it nicer. So what I'm expecting to happen if I run this is that it will create a base layer. It's a bunch of views. And then, oh no, it should create a bunch of views on raw, a bunch of tables on base, and one table on curated, because I have one table here, and I've specified that this should be a table. These should be views, and this should be tables. Now, how do I run this? Well, pretty simple. Let me make some space here. I can basically say dbt run. That's all I have to do. And it will go through and figure out the right order of things, go through all my models, figure out what I specified, looks at the number of threads that I want to use and go, hey, these things can all run at the same time. I can run 8 things at the same time. Let's do that. And after a while, it ran everything. And if I now go to my database and refresh, there we go. I suddenly have a bunch of tables, and I should have views here. And there's the view of the curated layer. That's basically what it does. So you have to be very specific. You have homework to do before you get it to run. And then basically it's dbt run and it figures things out for you. Cool so far? You like this? All right. It can do a bit more stuff, because now that we know that it knows the order and the references to everything, so we've made references, so it knows in which order it needs to run things, and it knows that it can run multiple things at the same time, which already fixes one of my problems. I can also, if I run into a problem with my system, let me first show you, this is a weird one. So I did dbt run, which just basically ran the whole thing. But the main one is dbt build. So software developers are going, build doesn't run anything. Build just compiles and such. But no, in dbt, build does everything. Let me show you the difference. Also cool part, I can just run this again. And it sees that I have 8 threads, and I'm going to use some other stuff. But what you can see now here, that it also does the testing in between. Because I also specified a bunch of tests, and it will just go, well, you've specified that the this badges table needs to be unique. So before I start using it, I will run that test based on it. And there's another one here. So it will basically do everything that you specified. Also cool, right? You can have it run everything, including the test. You can, of course, also dbt test. Run all your tests separately. and it will just run all your tests on your model if you want to see how your data is doing. And you can also say dbt test and then specify which model you want the tests. Just take that model, look at all the tests that you've specified for that, and only run them for that part. Now, this only running for a certain part, of course, you can do on the run as well. If I do dbt run, which model? I want to do base posts. Is that a model? Did I type this correctly? Yeah, there we go. No, need to type it. Base __ posts. That's a model. Why did it not run anything? This is fun. Huh, interesting. Let's run another one. dbt run model staging __ badges. Must have made a typo or something. Interesting. So you can, not sure what I did wrong. Not gonna start to try to debug this thing. Probably something silly. So you can run a single model. Okay, cool. You can run everything or you can run a single thing. That's not the most useful feature. What if you've changed something to a source because the data was wrong and you got the source again? And let's see, the curated. The curated is based on, for instance, users. So if I say I got a new users table, and the users table now has changed, and I don't want to rerun everything because it takes 4 hours or something. What I can do is dbt run model raw users. That will just run the nothing to do. What am I doing wrong? It's staging, Andre. It's staging. It's your own naming convention that's hurting you. stg __ users. There we go. But that would mean I have to go through all the models that are dependent on it, and it knows the dependencies. So what I can do, instead of just running this, I can put a plus sign behind it. And let me clear the screen so I start on the top so it's easier to see. I can put a plus sign behind it, and now it goes, so I need to refresh the model staging users and all the dependencies of it. So don't run everything, but that's the one thing that I changed and its dependencies. So it does staging users, it does the base users, it does the curated top 500 answers because it knows that that thing uses my users and it has changed. So I need to run that one again as well. So that to me is the coolest feature that it has. Can you do the plus sign on the other side? Of course. Can you do the plus sign on both sides? Of course. So if you change something somewhere in the middle, I change something in the middle. I want you to run everything that's dependent on it before and after, and it will just figure it out for you and run only the queries that it needs to run. Cool, huh? So far? All good? Here's a question for you. Do you see a use case for this? Do you see where you could have used this for a project or something like, okay, so I have to do some homework and model my queries in a certain way. But once I've done that, I can just run my whole process with dbt run. And if I change something, I can just run the things that I've changed by dbt run and then specify the model and put the plus sign in. It just runs the parts that it needs. Really cool. So this is where I really saw a use case. This is what I love. Now, it does. So I've showed you the running of dbt and how the dependencies work, and also how tests work. And the tests you can make. So I did a few simple ones. I just specified here's a column needs to be unique. You can specify your own tests by specifying a tests folder with queries in it, like run some fairly complicated tests. And you can also build your own tests that you can run on a column by specifying some Python code. So it's fairly complex what you can do. And there are also libraries that you can download and plug into this thing that have more complicated tests. Out of the box, it just has 4 or something that you can do. But you can run some really good testing scenarios on all your data to just before you start processing. Let's just run a whole bunch of tests. I kind of like how that works. Now, this to me is the most powerful part. You once you've done your homework, because you can see there's a bunch of homework, right? You have to, and it's there's not a whole lot that you can influence. You have to do it in a certain way so it will work for you. There are other things, other table types that you can run. It understands. Do I have that in the slides? I'll run the documentation first and then go back to the slides quickly. There are other ways to run tables, to create tables. What if you already have data in a table and you want to merge, right? Or you have, if you have slowly changing dimensions, how does that work? It can do that, but it does it in its own way. So first of all, let's show you the documentation. Let's see if I remember this command. Remember when I took where I put some information about a column? Was that here? Yeah. So I have a column named user ID, and I have a description here on the that I can turn into documentation. You can also have documentation files, and you can document all throughout the place. And I'll show you now how to collect that. So Martin asked if the plus signs for the dependencies, can you do it in a reverse way to run everything except this? I haven't seen that. So maybe if you have you're saying if you have a huge table and you just want to skip that, like rebuild everything, but not that big one. The big one is fine. Please don't touch that monster. I've seen that you can do that with the other table types where you have merge commands, where you can do a reload of everything. You can say dbt run full reload, and it starts to reload all these big tables as well. And you can specify that from certain tables to not do that for that one. Even if you specify a full reload, still skip this one. I've seen tables in SQL Server of over 100 terabytes in one table. Of course, you don't want to reload that thing. So you can do that. Not sure if that works with the pluses and minuses though, but maybe there's another way. So documentation. If I do dbt docs generate, it will compile all this data, and it will save it. So, oh yeah, I'll show you where to save it. It's written it to dbt target catalog.json. So there's a whole output here. There's target, and there's the catalog.json. So it basically created a JSON file with all the documentation, which in itself is not very useful. But it also wrote all the compiled queries, so you can see what queries it's going to run, including the schemas and everything. It wrote that to, it compiled it and saved it somewhere. So you can see exactly what it will run on the source systems. You can always find out what it will do. Instead of running it, you can just have it compile the stuff and see what will happen. So there's a bunch of stuff that it will just also the dependencies between everything. It will create a JSON file for it that you can run to make documentation or go through or run it somewhere else. It gives you some hooks into the system. Speaking of hooks, you could do pre and post queries if you want to log something to another table in the same database. You only have one connection. You can do that as well. So there's a bunch of options. But since this is an introduction, I didn't want to confuse everybody, including myself. Now, I just did dbt docs generate, but here's the cool one. dbt, what is it? dbt docs generate, and then the other one is forgot. Is it going to tell me? Generate or serve? Yes, it did tell me. dbt docs serve. Look at this. Let's see if that works now on my Mac. Boom. Here we go. I'll blow this up. it created documentation for me. It made a website. Now, it also saves that, and you don't have to host it here. This is just for debugging purposes. So you can actually take this and move this to a static website that you host somewhere. You can copy it. And if you don't like the way this website looks, you have the JSON that it uses as the source data of this website. So you can build your own if you want to. But look at how cool this is. I have the projects here. Is my models base and curated in raw. So I can go into my base model, go into the posts, for instance, or the users. It will tell me what columns I have, what types they are, who references them, who needs them. It's all documented, what they depend on, which code is run to generate them. This is the source code, and this is the compiled code. So it's all documented. And look at this one. There's a lineage graph. So it will tell you the dependencies of it. So you can go to your table, hey, this thing changes. What are the dependencies in it? All documented automatically. I think I found a bug or I'm doing something wrong yesterday. So there is the curated, the top 500 answers. It doesn't go back to the raw. I don't know why. Maybe I'm doing something wrong. So maybe I need to update to a newer DBT version. I don't know, but I found a bug in this thing. But this is this cool? You like this? All right, cool. You can go to the database view where you can see what it did in the database and in which schema. So it tells you everything about that, and there's also the dependencies there. So very basic but very useful documentation it can build, and you can go really far with this. I made a documentation somewhere in the model. I think that was on base. No, they look in the schema. No, not on this one. Was it on raw sources? Yes. So in raw, I have said that the badges have a description here. So if I go back to the project and I go to raw badges, description. There you go. Oh, this model is currently not documented. I thought I had, or is that on the badges table here? Interesting. It should have a description for the ID column because I'm specifying that here, right? Oh, that's the. Now that's not on those models. That's here. Badges. No. Interesting. Yeah, there it is. Interesting. It's here. So that one is not in the layers because I specified it on the source. So you can find it in the source in the database. But you can tell I'm a beginner as well with this DBT. I'm finding things out. So you can describe all the columns, but you can also have a description here. It says the source is not currently documented. You can document all the parts in everywhere. Just make the files in your Git, and it will document it for you. Now it's time, so I'll go back to the PowerPoint slide. Yes, here. Double click that. Now, too fast. Scroll the other way. I'm going too fast. There we go. ELT, but it does demo. Yeah, we've been through this. So I've talked about the ephemeral thing already. So you can materialize as a view, as a table, but also ephemeral, where it just hides it for you. There is something called snapshots, where that basically I didn't want to make all demos for all these methods because they can go quite deep, and since this is a starter, a beginner's an introduction, I didn't want to do that. But you can tell it to what is the unique key and what is the high watermark column. So the updated at, they call that here, and the column updated at is also called updated at in this sample. And you can say, okay, every time you have a new record, I want you to not update the record, but create a new one and close the old one. Give it an end date. Basically, slowly changing dimension type to give it an end date, make a new one, and it will make DBT starting from and DBT ending from or something columns. So it has specific column names that it uses for that. And then there's a and you can tinker with whether something is a full reload or not. You can say if you have really big source tables, you can specify and only read the source table with the data from last week and try to merge this or try to SCD this. Or if it's a full reload, you can ignore that where clause. There's a lot of control that you have with these Python commands. Here's an example, I think. Yeah, the incremental one. So the incremental one is if you get new data from a source and you don't want to blow up your existing table, you just want to add data to it. And this completely depends on what columns you give it. So I gave it the unique key and an incremental strategy for merge. So I'm basically saying that this you could either update this thing or add data to it. And depending on your destination, your target, it will use an upsert command, or it will use separate insert updates, or it will use a merge command. That depends on what your target system can do. I'm using Databricks. It has a really good merge system. You would use merge in Databricks, and it will do that. And in systems that don't support it, it will do inserts and updates. So it will figure that out for you. And it has a lot of control on is the source table just the data that changed? So do I need to read everything? Or is the source table a huge table and just add it to it? So I need to just grab the data from yesterday and try to merge that. Unless I have a full reload, then I read everything. You have a lot of control over that, but it gets a little bit more complicated than the just doing a select statement and just copy it across or make a view. But it is absolutely possible. It does that. So closing off, just a few minutes with what are they doing next? They are believers of something called a metric layer. And it looks much like a fact table to me, but maybe I'm old school. But they have very specific ideas on how to specify how to create a fact table or a metric layer. So instead of running big queries that summarize things and create that table for you, they have found a way. They've thought about a way to just specify this in YAML. How to just say, okay, we have these columns, and I want you to summarize it that way, and it will just generate these metric tables for you. This is where they were on a roll. They were about to release this, and then COVID hit, and they had to double the price, fire people. And they also bought another company that specifies in this metric layer, and they completely changed their mind and they ditched the old idea. So we're now a year after they've introduced the first one, and they've now introduced the second one that's based on the other idea, and it looks completely different. So I have not touched this. I'm probably not going to use this. I've got fairly complicated select statements to create my fact tables because of all the historical stuff in my system. I'm not sure if I can use this. I'll tinker with it, and maybe I'll go, actually, this is very useful. I don't know, but this is what they're focusing on right now, the metrics layer. Another one. They also have packages that you can install. So one thing that you didn't see me do, like what you can do in BIML, is you can say, here is a select statement that reads the source system, and it gets all the tables, and then I can do a for each table and just generate a whole bunch of packages. You saw me here create all these queries for all these tables. They're all there, but you cannot. And there's a templating language as well. But what you cannot do is go through for each source table, because it doesn't know how to figure out all the dependencies. So that's not possible. So you have to do your homework. You have to really type all these source tables. Per table, you have to do a select star from ref, this one. Now, there are utilities that will allow you to generate that. and copy paste that into your system. And if you're a bit good with Python or PowerShell or whatever language, you could probably also generate this yourself, but it's not built into DBT. It doesn't allow you to do that, even though there's nothing stopping you from generating a whole bunch of SQL files with references from outside and just putting that in your source code, right? As long as you test if the end result works, who cares where it came from, if you typed it or copied it or generated it. But the system itself doesn't do that. Now, there is a code gen model for it that will allow you to generate it for you, but all it does is grab it, generate it, and put it into your clipboard so you can paste it into a file. So, and there's DBT utils. There are a lot of sources that have standard queries that help you figure out what to do. There's not one that comes to mind right now, but there are source systems that you can. No, forgot. There are source systems that I recognize that you can use third-party tools, and they if you download data via their API, these utils will help you move that across your models because they have built-in queries already for it. Somebody did that work already, and you can just download that model and just use that instead of figuring out the queries yourself. I think this is the last one. What they are thinking of, and it's not clear whether they're going to put that into the open source one or the paid GUI-based stuff that they're building themselves. But what if you have many departments that use this, and you want to use data from another department? In the DBT models, you can specify what is private and public. So you can say my raw and my base are private, but my curated is public. So some other department can take their DBT and connect to your DBT and ingest those models and know which one they can use as their sources. They can use your curated models as their sources because you've announced that they are public access. And you can also have things like contracts and versioning. So you know other DBT instances that look at your DBT instances know what they can expect. And if you change something that would break their stuff, it would version it automatically and make sure that it would still work and is supported up to a certain amount of time. And there's all these things that you would normally expect from API management, for instance, where developers have APIs and they can't just go ahead and introduce something that will break somebody's code. So you work with versions and you introduce something that would break somebody's code into a new version, but you support the old version also for a bit. This is what they're thinking of doing. There's a little bit in it already, but I completely skipped that because it's not very useful for a starter, for an intro session, right? How that exactly works. Besides the fact that I don't know how it works exactly. I think we are, yes. So I think we're there. Let me put this back on. And stop the sharing. So that was DBT in a nutshell. For me, the most useful thing was the that I can run all the dependencies and it will just figure out what to run and when to run, and I can rerun specific parts and it will figure that out. I love that part. And the stuff that I really have to get used to is that it only works on SQL. There's a little bit of Python support. You can run some Python if you want to, but your code has to be SQL statements. That's it. That's it. That's me. I hope this was useful and it gave you a good idea of whether this is useful for you. So if you're thinking, that's great, I'm going to use that, excellent. If you're thinking, okay, no, that's not what I expected, I'm not going to use that. So excellent, because in 1 hour, I saved you a whole day of tinkering, right? You don't have to do that anymore. That's me. If you have any questions, let me know.
Okay.
And
Did anyone have any questions or comments or anything? Martin's got his hand up.
Yeah. I had a question. So with then scheduling it, I don't know whether I missed or didn't absorb that bit, but for example, with Databricks, are you just loading that as a package into your Databricks environment and just using the Databricks scheduling to say do my DBT run?
There's a couple of ways that you can schedule this. So you can run this from a container outside. Just run it from a scheduling tool that runs this on a container and just runs it against your environment, even though your environment might not be able to figure out how this works. In SQL Server on-prem, you would just run a command shell thing that will just run dbt run in a SQL agent, right? But for instance, Databricks has a job type called dbt. So you don't have to do anything. You can just say, hey, and also Databricks has a connection to your Git. So you can say, in dbt, I have a new job. It's this model. I want you to just do dbt test and dbt run. And here's my Git. Go. So now I don't have to make all these jobs with dependencies anymore. I just point it to my Git and I tell it to dbt run, and it's fine. So there's multiple ways of doing this. I've seen SaaS programs doing this. If you have Fivetran, for instance, is a SaaS provider that will. I use this for ETL with the known systems like Google Analytics. I don't write any code for that. I just have a SaaS subscription to Fivetran that I say, here's my Google Analytics, please dump that in my lake. It has a DBT functionality as well. You can say, grab all this data, dump it in my lake, and then run this DBT project for me, please. So it can run your transformations without running your transformations. It just fires it on your system.
And ADF is something similar? Azure Data Factory? Does Azure Data Factory plug in the same way?
So I haven't seen it. Does Data Factory now have a plugin for DBT? I haven't seen it.
Did you catch that one? Sorry, the microphone's up this end.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry.
But it seems like it's through containers. So I don't think there's a native plugin, but through.
Thank you.
Yeah, so anywhere you can run, this runs amazingly in a container. So anywhere you can run a container, this would run. What I've done in Data Factory, for instance, when I had to run Data Factory, an agent on we bought a company, and I went, dear company, here's a download to the runtime. I want you to install that on a Windows machine in your environment so I can get to all your databases. And they went, Windows? What is that? So they were Linux only, and they gave me an SSH connection. So I created a Windows machine in Azure, made an SSH connection on that, put the agent at the runtime on that, and to run it from Data Factory, you just use Azure Automation to start and stop it. So Azure Automation can also fire up a container for you, right? I think these days we even have containers for the runtime, but I'm not sure. Data Factory keeps it. Data Factory, I have the feeling that 3 years of nothing and then suddenly something cool happens. It's an interesting beast. But it's Python based. It runs really well in a container. So you can basically create your own container that has a connection to your Git, or you upload the code inside the container yourself and you fire that up against your source. You can do that. If you really want to, you can use the DBT environment. It looks a lot like you just saw me demo. It basically looks like a VS Code Git kind of work environment with a command line and scheduling mechanism. You can run it from there, but it runs single threaded only by default, and the threads are made from gold or something. They charge you a lot to have more threads. And I think having a lot of threads is the most powerful part in this. I want to run 50 queries at the same time. I have expensive Databricks clusters. Come on, they can do their work. So I choose to run it myself. And since I use Databricks, I'm lucky. It has built-in DBT support, but like I'm showing you here in GitHub Codespaces, that works, or a GitHub Runner or VS Code thing. There are external scheduling mechanisms that will support it.
I have one question. Apart from the semantic dependencies, I'm not sure if everyone here is aware about airflow. It's pretty visually more good for people who are not very technical as well. And if it's Python based, then I feel airflow is better. So I would just like a comment on this, whether it's good or not.
So airflow is an interesting one. So there's two things you can. Talking about DBT, right? And I'm not going to go into if airflow is better or not. You need to decide that for yourself. Talking about DBT with airflow, there are good libraries and good documentation for airflow to use. Use airflow as a scheduling mechanism, but have DBT as your documented process. So you could call DBT from airflow. So airflow will run your DBT. And there's a second way, and I've seen that one. I'm not sure if that's still supported, but there is an Airflow library that will read your DBT outcome of the JSON basically and create a whole Airflow dependency model from it and run all the stages separately. So you basically use DBT as the engine to create all the dependencies, but you run it in Airflow. So this completely depends on if you're an Airflow shop or not, right? This is a whole beast in itself. Airflow is a super powerful scheduling mechanism that can also run ETL for you. But yeah.
Thanks.
You want to just
Do you also do delta processing of source files? So that is if just the changes on, let's say you have a daily frequency, just changes into the target.
Yeah, I didn't demo that because I thought that was a bit too much for an introduction thing. But one of these targets, I have them somewhere. There's two targets. There's the view, the table, and the ephemeral, but you can also say snapshot or incremental. And the snapshot works as SED type 2 kind of behavior, like take from the source and see if you have it and then close the record and make a new one. And the incremental is the one that you're talking about. You take data from a source and then merge it into my destination. I don't want to drop my destination. I just want to merge it because it has 100 billion rows already. And you can and you have a lot of control to say if, okay, my source table is also really big and I've just added to it and I just want you to look at the differences there and then merge them with the other one. You have control over that. That just went a little bit too far for this demo. So yeah, you do. It does exist.
And when we talk about delta processing, does delete covers this also cover them? When transferring the delete files?
So does the delta, the incremental thing, do deletes as well? I think I read somewhere that it does not, and you have to run your own deletes or refreshes. So you can just still run your own queries, right? You can put a query in the middle that goes delete from where it's just SQL. So you can if the built-in systems don't support it, you can write your own delete query. That's totally fine, and you can still use the references to make sure that it understands the dependencies, but doesn't understand what you're doing. It will just run this delete. So there is a catch-all thing that you can do. And it also depends on your target system. For instance, Databricks merge doesn't do delete, I think, still not. So it depends a bit. Maybe it knows that and goes, oh, you want to do delete, then I will not use merge. I will just do insert update delete and figure that one out that way. I've seen examples where it doesn't create a merge, but you just specify insert update delete as CTEs and then do a select from this whole thing, and it will then figure out a complete new table for you. It's a bit, I didn't really understand what it was trying to do and why it was doing that, but probably because the target system didn't support something. But you can get creative. Let's put it that way. So long answer short, no, the deletes are special. Like in any database, deletes are a nightmare sometimes, right?
Yes.
You have to take care of deletes. They're a special breed of commands, you can't just run a delete on 100 million rows. It will just blow up your transaction log. But I've seen a lot of special ways of handling queries, so you could probably get away with what you want to do in your scenario. I would probably pick the hardest part in your system and try them first to see if that works before you go any deeper with DBT.
Anyone got anything else?
How well does it recover from error? So if you're halfway through a graph of queries and it fails, can you restart at that point?
Yes, and I say that you can hear my yes was really careful. I've not run into that. I've tried to mimic an error.
You don't
but
run on Azure databases then?
This is a tiny one. So that is on my list of things to try before I'm starting to use this thing in anger. What happens if it breaks and how does it restart? But it should. I'm being really. You'd see that yes and should are really carefully spoken by me. I'm not convinced until I tried it myself and I've seen it.
You can continue from the same position.
It does.
You can.
Yeah,
Okay.
it knows how far it's gotten through and continues from there. Okay. Thank you.
I've not seen it yet, but that makes total sense that it can do that. This thing was basically built by a company that used it for their consultants in the field. This was built in the field, so it has some logical stuff. It also has some very specific stuff that those consultants did in a certain way. So you'd see some commands and you think, okay, snapshot, but it is a SED type 2. That's not a snapshot. Anyway, so the naming conventions are a bit funny sometimes, but it does have all the features that you expect from a grown-up T, not an ETL, T system.
We've got a hand online.
You mentioned it's only for transformation. Does it mean that I need to use another tool for extract and loading?
Yes, that absolutely. That's exactly what you need to do. You can only connect to one system here, and if your source system is in here, reachable in the same database, then yeah. If you're doing a data warehouse on top of your OLTP thing or something, then you can get away with it. But it can only connect to the one warehouse, one data connection, and it does not move data. There is no extraction. There's no loading. You have to use something else for that.
All right. Thanks.
Well, if anyone does think of any other questions, you can always post them in the meetup, and we can pass them on to André to answer and all that sorts of stuff. So firstly, let me thank you. That was an awesome session. I think most people in the room seems to get something out of it. So thank you for giving up your morning.
Thank you.
Do you have anything else you wanted to add?
Sorry,
No.
the microphone cut out with the microphone thought the applause was not. Just what was that?
That was it. That was all good. We applauded. Martin, have you got anything?
Nope, all good. Great to see Andre again.
Yes.
On these bits of so long with COVID interrupting everything. But yeah, hope to see you back down under at an event here in the near future.
That would be cool.
But I appreciate with your new family edition on the way that it might be a little bit of planning around that.
Yeah, I went to Dublin for their Data Saturday a month ago, and that was my last one for the year. And it was beautiful. This is a weird one. Did you know that Dublin always has beautiful, gorgeous 30 degrees Celsius weather? Every time I'm there, it's sunny.
I'm going to have to coordinate with you next time I'm going to Dublin then.
Alrighty.
Smart.
Bring some sunshine to Melbourne.
Last time he was here. 3 quick announcements. Next month I've lined up a speaker from Microsoft to take us for a run through Fabric. For those that weren't aware, some of the big announcements out of Microsoft Build 2 months ago was Microsoft Fabric. So we've got Jim McLeod. He's going to dial in from Canberra, but he is an Australian speaker who used to live in Melbourne. So he's going to give us a run through, which is kind of exciting. So I will post that one on Meetup very soon and give you more than 4 days notice. I apologise for that. That one's on me. I will post as well the survey. So it's just a quick little 2-3 questions. If you've got any ideas for topics, if anyone wants to do a lightning talk and get a bit of experience as a speaker, we're also open to the idea of, you know, if you want to come up and just talk for a few minutes at the start of a session, or if there's a couple of people interested, we'll do like a showcase night where we'll just get some people who may not have a lot of experience speaking but want to just give it a try. We're a pretty friendly, comfy group. I don't know about you, but this setup seems to feel better than a big, you know, lecture room with a lectern and all that sorts of stuff. So it could be a good opportunity if you did want to talk about something. I'm sure we'll all listen and be interested, and as long as it's a data topic, you'll generally appeal to the group. So reach out, let us know. But I'll also put the survey link on Meetup, and it's just questions as well. Does Tuesday night at 6 o'clock work for everybody? Is there any suggestions around lunchtimes, different days, different all that sorts of stuff? Just type them in the comments, and you know, we'll take that on board. We've been going for about a year now since COVID, and we haven't changed a lot. So if you've got any ideas or comments, let us know. The only other thing I wanted to do was pick a number.
While Kelly's doing that, I just want to add with the new speaker bit. If you're not sure, if you want a bit of help, if you want a bit of assistance with it, then reach out as well. Quite happy to give you some one-on-one time to polish it up a little bit if you want to. Also, are you still involved with New Stars of Data as well, André?
No, that'll be William and Ben that do that one.
So there is a very big initiative that is now integrating with the past summit event in Seattle as well, with slots reserved for people coming through as new speakers. So if it's something that you are keen to get involved in, this can be your good starting point of something for the group here. But we will certainly help you to polish it up, promote it, and get it to these potentially international events as well. So there's a big avenue there for you as a new speaker. There's a lot of encouragement. And the other one that is currently on the radar that is looking for first timers as well is Data Saturday up in Brisbane. So have a look out for that one. Again, it's another very welcoming environment for first timers. So if you want to cut your teeth there, get some things.
The call for speakers for that one closes on Friday.
So get in quick if you can.
Sorry to say, but if you've got any ideas or if it's even an option, let us know and we can help you put something together quickly. Also, Martin and I are good friends with the organiser, so help out in that respects. And yay, going to Brisbane for a holiday in September, because why not? That's going to be exciting. So awesome. Cool. Anything else? 41. Just so happens to be over here, so I'll get your details before you go. It's just our little door prize to thank you all for coming in. Just get you out a little voucher, basically. So yeah, please keep coming in every month. Sorry. And yeah, if you put when you sign up, if you put in that you're coming in person, I've got a better idea of how many pizzas to order. It's kind of hard to know when some people don't fill that in, or they're not quite sure. It just helps me out. So all good. I think that's about it, unless anyone had any final questions or comments. Thank you all again. Thank you, André. Go and enjoy your lunch.
All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, André.
Thank you.
And hopefully the recording went well.
I'll let you know tomorrow.